next to you, put it right next to you, right here.
I told you, the real me's about to surface.
Shit.
Casual Tuesdays, but man.
We called them at 1:45
There's
because
another
the laptop wasn't
one
hooked
here.
up. We asked them to come up and do IT for us on spur of the moment.
Okay, thanks. I'd like to call the special meeting of the City Commission to order on Tuesday, June 26, 2018. If you'd all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our first item of business is to approve the agenda. I have one change in order to help out some of the residents that are here. I believe most of them are here for the second item of business, so if we could flip those two. We have a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved. So moved.
Second. Any comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Public participation. This is an opportunity for the public.
Clerical at 10084 LaSalle. I would urge the city, and especially since the engineering firm is here, to take a look at the curb in front of the library. It is deteriorating faster and faster, and it is really a danger to people who are trying to negotiate it going into the library.
Okay. Thank you.
Hi, Brian Hamburger, 13303 LaSalle. I was here a few weeks ago, brought up the sidewalk issue. I just have I guess it's a question. As you know, I went ahead and I had a small hairline crack.
Actually, if this is in regards to the sidewalk,
Oh, yeah.
that is an agenda item, so if you could hold your question or comment until that.
Okay.
Thank you. Any others? Any non-public participation is closed. Before we go on to the regular items of business, and since commissioners don't have a comment tonight, I would like to just take a brief moment and make one announcement, because I think it's rather important. Our former mayor of 35 years, Ron Gillum, has a special celebration this week. Ron and Shirley are celebrating their 60th wedding anniversary later this week, so I just wanted to let everyone be known of that. If you happen to run into them, to congratulate them.
We should give Mrs. Gillum some sort of medal or something.
Okay, first item of business is a matter of considering the ordinance and a discussion on sidewalk repair.
Yes, this is, was discussed at the last city commission meeting, and what you've been provided with are two different ordinance amendments. They both take the word repair and substitute the word replace, so that it's clear that when a sidewalk is deemed to be hazardous, that replacement is the method for repairing it. They also both include language that if a contractor is going to be doing the work rather than the city, they need to obtain a permit, post a bond, and receive permission for the city before proceeding with the work. And then they both have two different sets of standards. One set of standards would be the MDOT transportation standards, and the other would be standards set by the city. And so that is before you tonight to make a decision on those two ordinances two changes that are in both ordinances, plus the third one with regards to what standards you want the ordinance to refer to.
Another point that we should make is that where normally we have a first reading of an ordinance and then it's adopted at the following meeting, because the sidewalk program is about to restart, we are are not doing the first reading, so do we need any special language in our motion to address that?
You don't, you can certainly address it in the motion, you don't need any special language, there's no requirement that you have a second reading, so you're not waiving anything, this is just a voluntary decision to approve this on the first reading.
Okay.
And I also added that at your desk tonight were draft specifications from the Michigan Concrete Association that the DPW director provided, that if you decide to go with the version of setting standards set by the city, that we would refer to this document and pass that out to anybody that was interested in reading what the standards were.
Do we have a motion to start this discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I would move that we start the discussion, but I'm just, in whichever ordinance passes, believe that this reference to the industry standards is important to include. I don't believe that we need to set forth the mix and so forth in the ordinance, because the industry standards sometimes change depending on what different science, different areas of science produce. But I do think the city of Huntington Woods has the right to determine what standard it would seek compliance with, and whatever ordinance we pass just needs to, in my opinion, should say something along the lines that in full compliance with standards or regulations required by the city of Huntington Woods, just so that the citizenry or who's ever involved in this is on notice of the fact that there is a standard and it has to be complied with. But I don't necessarily think we need to like set forth, you know, whether it's MDOT or ASTM or whoever it is. I don't think we need to go make that part of the ordinance, but I think just by referencing the fact that there's a compliance requirement's good enough, in my opinion.
So that's referring to the ordinance that's in front of us with in the first section 32-186, the end of that first paragraph where it says all work shall conform to standards set by the city.
And that's the version that the staff is recommending as well.
So is that a motion to?
Motion to approve it, subject to the inclusion of that language.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
What if we go to discussion with the public first, and then we'll move back to the commission table? Do we have any comments from the public?
Brian Hamburger, 13303 LaSalle. I would just, I guess I'm looking for clarification. So whatever's decided tonight with the sidewalk, or what will be a revised sidewalk ordinance, how does that affect those of us that went ahead and made a repair per the old ordinance, which did not specify that it must be replaced, that just specified repair or replace?
Correct me if I'm wrong, does the repair need to be approved?
Yes.
So, as long as it meets the approval, it's gonna be acceptable.
Okay.
We'll send the DPW director out to take a look at it, and if he deems that it's not an adequate enough repair, then we would require replacement.
Okay, is that can you remind me, what is the DPW's name?
DPW director, Rocco Fortura.
Okay, different person than
The
visited. It
operator.
was a former, I believe.
Yes.
Okay. All right, so do I need to do anything to schedule that?
No, I'll take care of that.
Thank you.
His background is in cement work.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay. Any commission comments or questions? Commissioner Jenks?
Yeah, I did speak to Rocco, and he said the MDOT was very nice, but you could get lost in the verbiage, and suggested that this was much cleaner, it's much simpler. I would appreciate if these design and placement guidelines are referenced in the ordinance. Many of the ordinance I read from adjacent communities were much more specific, so that if someone, even if they had to replace it, they understood what the rules were, and any contractor that they dealt with understood what the rules were. This has quantities and specs, and it just would be referenced. I'm not suggesting that you put it in there.
Well, but if this is what the city guideline is, you know, I'm nothing against the idea of referencing the fact that the city has a standard, but rather than saying this is the standard, I'm just concerned if it changes. See, one of the problems we had here was, you know, people get caught in between things. So, like I said, if the standard changes, then that means we have to go back and amend the ordinance, and I'd rather pass something that's clean, that simply says, look, the city has a guideline, the city has a standard that has to be followed. So if it changes in 5 years, whatever, the ordinance we pass tonight will be applicable. Somebody can't say, well, it changed, or I did this, or I did that. But there's nothing, in my opinion, putting in the words referencing the standard that the city requires is the same as what you're saying, because it's the same. If the city, this is the standard that the city has adopted, why do you need to say the city has adopted this standard?
It just becomes easier
For who?
if for a contractor that's going to deal with someone in the city, because they don't have to call people, they can look here, and if they're in cement work, they are very frequently following this standard, or the MDOT standard.
They have to get a permit anyway.
But my feeling is, I would be much more comfortable if I saw some standard mentioned in there, especially if I'm a resident, and especially if it's gonna cost me a couple $100 a square.
Mr. Mayor. Could we have wording in there that would say, you know, current standards? I mean, if it changes, then it's the current standards, whatever.
Same
I think
thing.
we're all,
Okay.
we're talking, everyone's talking about the
Same
same
thing.
thing, it's just
Yeah.
a matter of the words.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm not exactly sure what words you're looking to change.
The only thing,
Standards set by the city, what do you want?
instead of saying it as set by the city, in accordance with the current Michigan Concrete Association driveway and sidewalk design and placement guidelines, period.
If that's the city's guideline, that's fine. But if the city, I'm not,
This
like
is
the
the
mayor says,
guideline
I
that
know,
the director
today,
gave me. Yeah.
today. But if that changes tomorrow, for whatever reason, why have something referenced that can be changed when what you're trying to do is gain compliance with the city's standard?
Because if we say current, then when someone comes to pick up a permit, they can get this, but they also can look it up under MCA and see exactly what it is.
Well, I have no objection to inserting the word current in the language.
But we ought to tell them what we're referring to. I mean, that's the only thing.
Well, not that.
Mr. Mayor, my concern is that if we start referencing the Michigan Concrete Association, and then they become the Michigan Concrete Federation, or they add Michigan Concrete and Block Association or something, now all of a sudden the ordinance is obsolete. Or if at any given time they stop producing these guidelines and we have to go to another association or another organization to grab their guidelines, the way the ordinance is worded now would provide us some flexibility in that, and that we could just go out and grab another association's guidelines, and that becomes the city's standard. So I don't want to lock into a particular association standards, because This organization could become defunct and be replaced by something else. It could change its name. I just don't want to be that specific. My goal is that folks sitting at this table years down the road will not have to worry about amending this because it's able to function in perpetuity until such time it's repealed.
If I could just offer as an alternative, something that you could consider is, instead of addressing it specifically in the ordinance, maybe pass another motion, a second motion, where you would adopt the concrete standards as they may, as the city standards as may be changed or amended from time to time. That's another alternative, is to do it by a separate motion.
This
Yeah, that's
word current picks that up in my, I mean, less is more here. You know, if you say current, then that means current. I mean, the world's greatest textualist can't argue with that.
But I think that does satisfy what Commissioner Jenks is
Yeah.
getting at, and that then it's by resolution, and it can just be placed on a meeting agenda to change the standard. I mean, if...
Or even by motion tonight, you could do it by.
Well, right, we would
by
adopt it
motion.
tonight, and then in the future, if something needs to change, we'll just
That's
adopt
fine.
a motion.
That's
Yeah,
fine.
all right.
That's fine.
Fine.
So does the word current need to be added to the ordinance, or are we good with all work shall conform to standards set by the city?
I'm fine with it as
Yeah, not if
written.
we're having a separate motion. I don't think it needs to be changed.
All right. Any other comments or
Just-
questions, Commissioner?
Just a question.
Mayor Pro Tem.
That's okay. With the ordinance taking effect in 21 days? 20 days. How will
21
that,
from today.
how will that have an impact on the progress? Will we be starting up in 20 days? Or when will we restart the program?
Starts the ninth. I think.
July 9th.
Okay, so how will we,
Is there a way to waive the waiting period?
You really should comply with the waiting period.
But you still, at this
does,
point in time, if you repair it, it has to
Right.
meet.
Still has
okay,
to be approved.
And actually, Rocco at the last meeting explained that you really can't glue it to repair it.
right.
And that the methodology that needs to be done is extremely expensive.
Okay.
In spite of what I see on television, that for $50, mix the gray and the white until it, or black and white until it becomes gray. Rocco.
On the
ex-
shopping channel, Commissioner Jenks, I must have
No,
missed that.
after I watched The Burst, the next one explained to me how I could repair my sidewalk.
Sorry I asked.
Sorry about that, well, I had to respond.
All right. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that the City Commission adopt the Michigan Concrete Association driveway and sidewalk design and placement guidelines as the guidelines established by the City of Huntington Woods.
I'll second.
Any public comments or questions? Any comments or questions at the commission? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Moving on to a discussion on the sewer repair program.
Yes, I thought it'd be a good idea to have a special meeting tonight to go over the upcoming sewer repair program and to discuss both the timetable that staff's proposing as well as the funding vehicles that we are proposing. If we can come to a consensus tonight, then I'll put this on the agenda in July to formally adopt the proposed program. And we'll have ballot language at that time for you to review as well. So I have Tim Germain here from No Active Frauds. He's going to do a PowerPoint on the sewer repair program as planned, as well as the different methodologies that will be
Thank you.
used in order to repair the sewers that need to be repaired. You have another one?
Yep.
Okay.
Good evening, my name is Tim Germain, I'm with Noack and Kraus. I've been here consulting the city engineer through my company for some 25 years. We assisted on the original work with the recommendation of the sewer cleaning And at Amy's request, she asked that I kind of bring all this together in one happy little package. So you can either follow along in the handout or watch up front. It's the exact same thing. Back in 2015 through 17, we had a cleaning project with the CCTV, closed circuit television investigation, sewer cleaning of the entire city. That work had been done by Allstate Power and Vac, and this is what we accomplished to date. Phase 1 work, which was done in 2015, approximately 49,000 feet of 6 to 12 inch sewer were cleaned, 37,000 feet of 15 to 21 inch, 13.4 you can read down, for basically 105,000 linear feet, or almost 19 miles of sewer cleaning. That cost for that first phase was about $457,000. I see a typo in there that should say Phase 2 work in 2016. I apologize for that. Threw this together today. 30,000 linear feet of 6 to 12 inch was cleaned, 10,900 linear feet of 15 to 21, 9,000 feet of 24 approximately, another 9.5 miles for about $249,000. So effectively in those 2 years, we cleaned about the entire city, 29.5 miles of sewer, 155,367 linear feet, for a grand total of about $707,000 of, we'll call it an investment, because those sewers are obviously part of the city. And prior to this, with the rain events and issues we were having and the flooding that was occurring, there was some major backups and issues that everyone's well aware of. So the first phase of this work was basically to clean the entire city. A fair amount of debris was removed from the sewer lines. I have 2 volumes of information from the contractor that I have on disk, or I can drop off here, that shows everything, and I'll allude to it a little bit later. But they basically cleaned the entire sewer, televised it, heavy cleaning where heavy cleaning was needed, debris removal, root removal, infiltration removal, all of that kind of stuff. And basically the goal was to get the system to operate at approximately 90% of its design flow. And I think we have that, because the last several rain events, there's been, knock on wood, no issues or backups. The traditional way to fix sewers, we all know, is the open cut method. Basically that means we dig a big hole, excavate down to the existing line, and dig up the pipe or the debris. This is obviously very costly. It's very difficult to do in a residential or commercial setting, simply because of how close everything is. There's crisscross utilities. When this was vacant land and farmland, and the road was in and there was nothing there, easy to dig. Today's technology, this is the most expensive and most difficult way to repair something, simply because of the amount of buried treasure that's out there, whether it's your gas line, your water service, your sewer lines, gold coins, whatever. So this is the traditional method of repair. They have today a couple of new technologies, which I'd really like to impress upon you as an option. It's how most cities are working. The first one is the pipe bursting method, where basically a large cone is hydraulically pulled through the existing pipe, and what it does is it breaks the pipe as it's pulling a new sacrificial pipe through here. The typical pipe that's used is HDPE. You see it come on trucks. It's 20, 30 feet long, and basically that pipe is pulled through the existing pipe and breaks it. So I have a YouTube video that happens next. If Tim, you could set that, I'm sorry, one more slide first. One more, just like click that.
It's spinning.
No, go ahead and click the button, just advance it one more.
No, it's frozen.
Oh, it's frozen. Okay, well, then you might have to follow along.
Here we go.
Okay, here we go. If you double click in that box, and cross your fingers, the video's supposed to start. Yeah.
That's what the inside of a sewer line looks like.
In the dark at night. With the lights on. Might take a minute to load.
Try to connect to the
I wonder if
internet.
it's the internet,
Well, I encourage you to watch the video. It's very simple to understand. It's an animated 2-minute video, and it basically very easily shows what is involved with it, very simplistic terms. But basically, you set up on the street, you connect to an existing manhole, they dig down in line, slide a steel cable through from manhole to manhole. That's connected to a big pipe with a big proud V on it, or we call it a pig, but basically it's a steel.
Accept the Wi-Fi through there.
It's a steel pipe that pulls this HDPE pipe through the existing center of the existing sewer. And what it does, because the condition of the pipe is bad, like the vitrified clay that we have in the city, it breaks it up. It expands it ever so slightly. The diameter is about the same, so there's some slight consolidation, but basically without open cutting and digging up the entire street or green belt area, you're basically pulling this pipe through and it's reconnecting from manhole to manhole. Then what you do is you go inside the one manhole, and because this is pre-videotaped, they register where you are, so the Ys that are on each house are then gone in with a cutter that runs inside that new pipe, finds it like a zip tool. If you're doing drywall work on trying to do an outlet, it finds that hole, goes around, opens the pipe back up again. Or in the worst case, you have to do a manual dig on the outside to reconnect that lead. And that's basically the gist of pipe bursting.
Want me to just go back to the PowerPoint?
If you can, yeah. So go down to that slide, there you go. So basically, there's approximately 40%, you can go back one, Tim. Nope, backwards. Right there. There's approximately a 40% cost savings in traditional methods in digging it up. The repairs are underground without damaging the surface. The pipes can be replaced with a continuous HDPE pipe, no joints, no spacing, no gaps. It fills the voids of the pipe that have shifted and settled. It's stronger than just a sewer lining. You can upsize the pipe if you're running through clay, if you're trying to update a 6 or 8 inch sewer that's in the back of some of the green belts and back of some of the houses. We can pull a 12-inch through and increase the capacity of that. We correct some minor grading. Obviously, you got a point at the upstream manhole and a point at the downstream manhole, and those two are connected. But if there's a belly in the pipe that's holding water in there, that'll kind of be eliminated through the process. Again, it minimizes all the surface distribution or disruption, and the repairs are permanent. So that option is available for pipes that are generally in the smaller size that are vitrified clay. It's harder to pull through a break concrete, but if the concrete's beat up enough, you can pull it through, and you can break concrete pipe as well.
Let me ask you a question. So
Yes.
when you pull this pipe through it and you burst the existing pipe, is there potential for damage to the residents' connections to that pipe? And then how will those be handled once the new pipe is pulled through?
There shouldn't be any damage, but sometimes they do get disconnected, and that's what I said. When you go back and reconnect the Y, they'll go cut every one for the gap, and if it's not a clean seal between the new pipe and the old one, then they manually have to dig up, like if you're doing a sewer repair at your house, you'd have to dig up at that Y location and reconnect the Y the old traditional way. But it's a little bit easier to dig a small hole like this at each home than to dig up the entire street all the way across 15, 20 feet deep, or whatever the depth of the sewer is, and sometimes 10, 12 feet wide. Yes, sir.
What's the length, in other words, when you do these, when this procedure is followed? I assume at some point you have to go down and open up an area to be able to get the equipment in to pull it through and so forth. So what is the, how big of an area at a time is what I'm asking for? How many feet?
This material generally comes in 30-foot lengths on a semi, because it's limited to what you can haul on the expressway, but if you look at those YouTube videos and they are friction sealed together, they're heated up, so just like you're pulling one pipe through, if you have a seamless gutter or something like that, you just keep pulling it through, they weld it together and they just keep pulling it. So you could go 600 feet if you wanted, they just got to seam together all these pipes, and the connection, just like a weld, when you steel weld, is stronger than the actual steel that you're welding onto. It's the same thing with this material. So as you pull one section in, you get the other one ready, they seam it all together, heat seal it together, keep pulling all the way through. So it's one seamless piece of pipe when you're done, from manhole to manhole, and the manholes run from 200 feet to 600 feet to 800 feet. Generally, we like to see a manhole at least within 600 or 800 feet, and that's what most of the city has. So it can be done. The obvious benefit is that very little damage to the surface, very little damage to the residents' property, and you don't make a huge mess, and everything is just kind of left in place, and it kind of protects the pipe. It's just additional bedding. So
How long does it take to reconnect each individual home? So how long will a homeowner be without?
it would just be the day.
Okay.
Generally, you know, they will do a section, and if there's 10 houses on there, those will be reconnected the same day. So basically, it's the same thing as if we were doing a water main or a sewer project. You can't flush a toilet or you know, don't use your facilities for a couple of hours at a time, and they should be able to reconnect it. It's very rapid, you know, especially when they cut those things, those just take minutes. So, and most of the time, the seal is there and the connection can be made like that. I would say maybe 20% of the time they gotta dig it up and reconnect it. But obviously, a lot goes into that age of infrastructure, how well it was built in the first place, whether there were collars on it. But generally, this is the preferred method of repair to eliminate not only cost, but also to, you know, eliminate the open cutting. So, next slide, Tim. This is kind of a picture of what is happening there. You got a machine on my left, and it's going through and underneath, and they're just pulling it in from the edge of the basement. This is actually for a lead, but it applies to the mainline sewer as well. They hook up to it, pull it through there with that hydraulic ram, and it is reconnected. I really do hope that you get a chance to look at the video, because it's very, just at home, just
I saw it.
Friday.
Yep,
yeah.
yep. I saw
Even
it.
if the one book has the picture on there, the one that I downloaded, Trenchless Technologies Pipe Bursting. If you just Google that or YouTube it on your phone on the way home, you'll see it. And it was a very simplistic but very detailed example of what this repair is. Okay. The second option is.
Are there other
Yes, sir.
cities in our area that have this?
More and more cities are doing that. Our firm had done this work in Pontiac back in 2005 to 2007. We did 40 miles, $15 million worth of sewer lining. So that was kind of forced on them by the DEQ. But all of these communities that are reaching 50, 60, 70 years of age, that's all these pipes were designed for. You know, there was a 100-year life of a pipe. It'll be, you know, still in service after I die, but in the future, no one really thought about it. So this type is being used, both types, this CIPP and the pipe bursting is being used by many communities to reline, improve the flow characteristics for sure, and to replace some of the damages that they have simply because it's the most inexpensive option when it comes to comparing it to open cutting, so. The next method is a cured-in-place liner, which is basically a similar type repair, only this time you don't break the pipe. A casing pipe goes in and through, and again, there's a YouTube video in there, and what it is, it's flat when it goes in, slides through the pipe, gets inflated, and then that thing melds to the inside, the interior of the pipe. So any defects in the pipe or any chips and bends and stuff, it form fits to that item. It's blown up, it cures with epoxy resin, hardens, and maybe it takes about 1/8 to 1/4 inch of the flow, the area out of the pipe, but that's minimal with regard to comparing that to obstructions or things that are in the pipe. Again, this way it doesn't crush the pipe, it just simply is a coating to reline it, and it's also, it provides more flow characteristics than it does to fix structural problems or breaks or offsets in the pipe itself. So it's basically a liner, if you will.
What about tree root intrusion? Is that minimized by both of these methods?
Well, we have a clean system now, so generally speaking, there shouldn't be many tree roots in there. The HDPE is pretty thick, so tree roots are really not supposed to find their way into it. With the liner, obviously, if you've got tree roots already intruding into the gaps and joints in the pipe itself, this is going to block it for some time. It may not block it for another 50 years, but it's going to block it for some time. The tree root issue is kind of an ongoing maintenance item that, you know, we'll talk about a little bit later in the program, but that kind of needs to be done simply because Huntington Woods is a tree city, and, you know, there's a lot of mature trees everywhere over and above the lines that we have in the city, so.
So if we're looking at embarking on an ongoing maintenance program where the city's divided up, these pipes that are lined, there's no risk of the auger damaging the lining or anything like that while it's being run through if there are tree roots in there or anything like that?
No.
Okay.
The first step in both of these is they televise the line and clean it. That's just like we did over here, just to make sure that there's nothing in there, no sharp obstructions, no other stuff. They clean that first. And then they go through, put the liner in, again, mark it, get the Ys, and then televise it again, make sure everything's functioning. You know, everyone flushes their toilet and make sure the flows and connections are there and it looks sound and sturdy. So either option, there's a pre-video and a post-video.
I think what he was talking about was if we do cleaning like 5 years from now.
Mm-hmm. That was, yeah, the pot, you won't damage the inside of that plastic HDPE, and this liner, it's supposed to be pretty hard. It's not concrete lined, but it's epoxy resin, and if you ever tried to, you know, chip a floor or do something that's got an epoxy resin on, it's pretty hard to get through that material. It's made to last a long time. So I've not heard of any damage caused by cleaning. I mean, I mean, anything could happen, but again, the reason you're doing this in this case is to improve mostly the flow characteristics. You'd use this maybe on a concrete pipe that wouldn't be easily broken, that's maybe offset or got a little bit of a bend to it or belly or reduction in size, or has been squashed, just deformity from the, you know, years of earth on top of it. But
So what happens if we put in this particular liner and then we find out down the road that we've got to replace it, repair it? How do we get it out?
it would just be cut through like any construction material. If we were gonna have to go in there, do an open cut like we have in a couple of places where we've got missing pipe or default, we gotta dig it up, you can just slice right through it, and you can put a fitting on it and just put the two together again. You can use the same repair, or in that case, if you're digging it up, you're gonna put a new pipe in there and just connect it to each end, simply like you would any other repair on any kind of pipe. It's not solvent weld, but it would be a firm co-fitting that would fit over the two and connect the two pipes together, so. Industry standard repair.
Tim, are you aware of communities near here where this has been done by your firm?
Our firm, I can only say we've done it in Pontiac. There's been a lot of bids out here because obviously the SAW grant is what kind of created this program, so all the communities that took advantage of the SAW grant, or in our case, you guys paid for it independently, found out that they had all these repairs. Then the DEQ says, as a result of using our money to investigate, you have 3 years to go and fix everything. So what's happening this last year is there's been a glut of projects on the street of simply sewer lining, because one, they found areas in each of these communities that needed repair, and so this is happening very frequently now, simply because it's a requirement of the SAW grant funding to fix what you find, especially if it's in a specific range of defect. So. This is again the video, but that doesn't work. You get the benefits of this is that there's a structural repair of some of the old pipe, although more minor than a full replacement. There's a high resistance to oils and chemicals. I mean, we are generally a residential community, so it's not a commercial or industrial area where they're dumping or using processed waste waters and chemicals, so you shouldn't be seeing anything more than just somebody cleaning their, household chemicals going into the pipes. It is suitable for all types of materials. It's ecologically compatible, low cost and time-saving method. It's very quick to do. No interference in infrastructure. You can turn bends with this stuff, 90 degrees. It's very flexible. It adheres to the pipe that you have in the place. Some horizontal and vertical rehabilitation. Again, you're not going to fix major grading problems, but it'll smooth the line between the pipes. And it is pretty good for, infiltration, exfiltration, root intrusion. Simply just because it's a new liner that's, again, a 1/4 inch thick when it's sealed, and you've got basically, we'll call it a new pipe on the inside.
Tim, if this is adhering to the existing pipe and you have a belly system in that line, is it not resolving that issue?
It won't solve that problem, no. But if you had done the pipe bursting, then that would be spanned, and that alignment would be there, and you'd get rid of that little belly. But we found a fair number of bellies, and I would expect that in a 60-year-old infrastructure.
Okay.
But not the end of the world. Again, here's kind of the same little video of how that does work. Again, I encourage you to look at the YouTube videos. They're very, very detailed, and I wish that they had worked. When Allstate was coding or doing their sewer replacement, although we weren't following the strict SAW grant requirements, this is how they used the ratings that are in the 2 volumes of data that I have, and you'll see some highlights from it later on. But this is the coding that you can find, and we have in some of the pipes, and they variously, depending on which ones you're into, define whether the pipe is a level 1, which is the least damaged pipe, to a level 5, which is the most damaged pipe, just simply by these, items that you're going to see. I got a picture of the inside of the pipe so you get some idea. For structural defects, there's cracks, there's fissures, there's broken pipes, holes, deformity. If you've got they call it rigid pipe, which is like a concrete or vitrified clay, it will squeeze down. It starts round and it's kind of egg-shaped after 30, 40 years. There's flexible pipe, which are, CMPs and that kind of stuff. There's collapses entirely, joint displacement, joint changes, alignment issues, cracks, lining features, all of that. So this is the information we utilize to kind of rate the sewers and to determine how bad they were and what needed to be fixed. Okay. This is another segment from this NASCO. They're the pipeline assessment company that trains everybody here locally, and this is what they follow. There's other defects that are operational and maintenance issues, kind of deposits in the pipe, roots in the pipe, infiltration, obstructions, whether it be pieces of broken manhole structure, pieces of concrete, somebody built their driveway and opened up the sewer and the concrete chuck filled the catch basin with their runoff. That kind of stuff is in there. So when we cleaned the system, I don't have an exact volume of material, but I believe there were 20 truckloads of stuff removed from the 90-some miles of sewer. So there was a fair amount of debris that you would expect with a system of this age. Again, construction features that affected our taps. So taps, how they are, the alignment, the angle, whether they work or not, and those are just construction type features. So if you turn to the next page, this is an excerpt from one of your pipes. As you can see, the one on the left is still fairly good shape. At the bottom, that discoloration is the water that's running in there. The outer side, I apologize, the photo didn't come out really great, but if you want to watch the videos, we have 2 summers worth of videos. It's very interesting stuff if you're into it. If you want to go to sleep watching it, you can do that too. On the left is more of a level 2 condition. You see there's a little bit some deformity, some scrunching. You can see the joints and the gaps. On the right-hand side, obviously this is a pipe that's near collapse, near failure. You've got major fractures and cracks and some displacement in the joint that's in front of you. That is obviously a pipe that probably would benefit from being open cut and fixed. The one on the left could be repaired with the CIPP or running the pipe bursting material through there and relining that pipe. I'd probably, if we were going to design these, look at these today, we would sewer line the one on the left and we would try to open cut the one on the right. But obviously there's 19 miles of this stuff, and that every one of the gaps and breaks and deformities is documented in those 2 volumes, and we have it on an external hard drive. So if the city wants it, we can download it for you. You just need a large space to put it on your server, and you're more than welcome to have that if we haven't already given it to you. I can't remember. It might have gotten to Jay before he retired, but okay. So let's look at the analysis. It's probably hard to read on the screen, but if you open up one of your bent sheets there, we basically broke these segments into 2 segments, the 2016 priority segments and the 2016 maintenance. So in the upper left-hand corner, you're going to see a little heading. Basically what this spreadsheet shows is the starting and ending structure on the left as we work our way across. It gives you some kind of structural defect coding that we put in there, the length of the pipe, the method of repairs, the pipe state, the repair method, the duration of the video, and then lengths upstream, downstream, the size of the pipe, whether it's vitrified clay or concrete, downstream, major. So we generated an estimate off of these 8 pages of garble, which were kind of condensed from the 2 summers worth of data. And if you zip through a couple of these, Timothy, till we get to the end of them, you'll see a repair cost data and location. There you go. One more click, please. This is our estimate after we took a look at those 8 pages of data, and I won't bore you with all the details, but we believe that we have approximately $13 million worth of costs that the city will need to bear in the foreseeable future. The stuff that is in the pipe bursting and the slip lining are, let's call it, less of a priority for the city. The stuff that's in the sectional repair, that first $4.4 million, that's stuff that if we had submitted for a SAW grant, the DEQ would make us and force us to be repaired within the next 3 years. That's just simply what it is. And these are structural defects in the level 4 and level 5 range, meaning we have holes in the pipe, we have settlement in the pipe, we have missing pieces of pipe, we have severely cracked pipe, we have washouts, and those are things that shouldn't be left too much longer, because with time they will just steadily degrade and cause sinkholes or washouts or backups or issues if those pieces got back in the system and were washed up and down. So the other $6-7 million are what I would put on your longer range forecast. And those are the slip lines which can be done rapidly and/or in conjunction with some of the other necessary repairs. If you switch the page, I updated our map that we've been working with you guys on since 1995 when I was a young man and had brown hair. The dark color pictures designate all the roads that we've reconstructed since I've been here. The ones that are still open are areas that we have yet to go into, future areas. I am certain that we can find within this listing areas that are on roads that we have not repaired. So if we were going to do an open cut repair on that, we're not just simply cutting through a brand new road and fixing a sewer pipe. I would focus on the areas that we have not done any surface or reconstructions on, and then that way when we repair and dig the pipe up, we can backfill, fix the road, and at least leave it in a better shape than it was before. You get one more page. This is the last slide I have. I understand, talking with Amy, that you guys want to take a look at a pilot project here in 2018, that some $250,000 had been set aside or budgeted or will be budgeted whenever you do your budget to do a test of these repairs. It would take us about 4 to 6 weeks to do that, and I think we could get ready for a late summer, fall work. It'd be my recommendation that in the next 3 to 5 years, so from today to 2020 or 2022, that the city find a funding source and start attacking the repairs that are in here, concentrating on the $4 million, which are the worst of the worst areas of the city that would need to be fixed first. And then that, once that's done, the monies can go into the slip lining and the pipe bursting to extend the life of those sewers that are, reaching their critical age. In 2020, I think I would start foaming again because we obviously have a brand new clean system. I would go into historical areas that you've had issues at before, because usually what you do is you get a call from a resident or something and say, hey, my sewer's not functioning well. You go in there and there's a root mass developed. Obviously some of those areas and the historical guys are gone, but Rocco's there and Marty's here and a couple other guys that have been around a long time generally should remember where a lot of those past issues had been, and I would start doing some of that foaming probably around 2020. And then in 2025, I would budget another $1 million to start beginning to clean the system again, because by that time, about 10 years or a decade will have transpired between this cleaning in 2015, 2025, to take a look at, what else is out there, or, something that was in fair condition is now bad and needs to be fixed, or something that was in good condition is now fair and should be on a slip lining, system for you. So that's really all I have in a nutshell. I hope that kind of give you all an idea of what is involved. Again, I encourage you to look at those videos. They're very helpful. But the data you have in front of you, it's a lot of data. You can, take it home, absorb it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions tonight, or if you got other questions, give them to Amy, and she can send them to me, or I can come back some other evening, whatever.
On the segment breakdowns, some of them list a repair method and some don't.
Yep.
You know why that is?
Those are the ones that don't are generally in good shape and don't require any work at this time. So we've concentrated the ones that are highlighted in the red, the priority segments, the ones that have bad on them with a darker color red.
Okay.
Around your color there.
Yeah, so when I get into it'd be the 2017 priority segments.
Yep.
There's quite a few red on there that don't have a repair method.
Yep. Well, based on our judgment, again, we tried to take 2 years of data and analyze it from a lot of stuff, and when we watched that, we were making notes all the way through there. So if it's not listed on there, the bulk of the pipe isn't that severe. I mean, just because one joint is bad or 20 feet is bad of 600 feet, we're not gonna say you're gonna replace the whole 600 feet, you know, especially when it comes to digging up the worst part. So our estimate basically isolates some of those things, and we have just a each per each cost estimate on there, because we have to go back and review the tape again, make sure we know the start stop, put a plan together, and at that point we'll do the design part. This is just kind of an analysis of what was there, and like I said, we wouldn't want to redo the entire pipe if 80% of it's good. That would just be wasteful. So we can get pieces near manholes that you can slide some of that in a part of the way, but it may not need full replacement or full repair or remediation from the whole manhole to the other manhole.
So I guess like an example might be line 30 on that page, where it indicates it's bad and the pipe wall failure is a complete failure. It says complete collapse at 11.5 feet, but there's no like repair method listed. So I would think that would be maybe like a sectional replacement or something like that.
That would be a sectional, but I'm guessing because there's 8 sheets and they're very small, that when we did this estimate, there was higher priority on other areas that were worse, and those are the ones that are designated, because this was kind of thrown together for the end of the first year and the end of the second year. We did this analysis. I apologize, it's been a couple of years since I've really looked at that stuff, but we have all the videos that we can, you know, go and refresh ourselves on the actual location of the damage, and that's really a design type process anyway. So
when we get into the year that these are going to be queued up, then these will be filled in once
Yes,
you
correct.
watch the video and are, okay.
Yep.
Tim, the 13 million is phase 1 and phase 2 combined?
Correct, the entire city.
Okay, and how many miles do we have of sewer?
19.75 is what we, or sorry, 29.5. Yeah, first segment was 19.75, the second was 9.5, so 29.5. So we, again, went through and itemized the worst, the ones that are full failure, but again, just be something that has a crack on it. That crack is a crack, but it is not as severe as if the pipe is collapsed or part is missing. And if the flow of the pipe is good on the bottom, which is where 90% of the flows are, and the repairs or damages on the top of the pipe, we didn't put that in there either, because simply the pipe's generally not flowing full. But again, you got 29 miles of pipe, and that's like asking me where every crack is for 29 miles and there's a joint every 12 feet, you know. We have the data, we can always go back to the video to find it, and when we do the design, we'll be very sure that we are fixing what we had to do for those segments that we chosen. A lot of these things can be repaired with just the slip lining, because they're not that bad of a break that it will hold itself in place, or the pipe bursting, because you're just bypassing the crack anyway. So all I was really concentrating on is if I saw a missing pipe, if I saw where we couldn't get through the pipe because it was damaged or something was blocking it. Usually when they run the camera through, they go both ways. If they hit an obstruction because they can't get through, they run it through the other way. So it got clean, but the obstruction couldn't be removed. So those are the areas that are critical to me, that are going to obstruct flow, that are going to possibly wash out, that are going to possibly collapse and cause a sinkhole. Those are the critical things, the sectional repair. The other ones, I don't want to call it a Band-Aid because it's better than a Band-Aid, but those lining and the bursting will repair every crack along that entire pipe where we choose to put it. So a lot of those things can be fixed with one operation pretty independently from manhole to manhole. But again, the city should really focus on the first 4 million-ish, which is where we really got to open up stuff, repair it, put it back together, because the slip lining or the pipe bursting won't solve that problem. The degree of damage is too great.
Mr. Mayor? So the total cost of the project is close to 14 million,
13,700,000, yes.
700,000.
That's what we estimate today.
Yeah. So you're estimating that based on what? How did you come up with all of this pricing?
The bids that have been coming out by these other communities, we use as a basis.
Okay.
We called a couple of contractors and said, what is your fix for a 50-foot segment? What's your fix for a 100-foot segment? What's your fix for, 2 miles? And so these averages are, they might be a little inflated, but they are good budget numbers for you guys so that you don't fall short by 25, 35, 40% on your budget. I'm pretty confident with today's market. I mean, if you want to wait till the next downturn, you can probably get this for half price. But, the problem with construction is every year that we have a good year, generally the contractor's pricing is increasing.
I'd have a hard time telling the residents they got 4 feet of sewage in their basement because I was waiting for half price. So
Right.
we're not going to do that.
Yeah, you don't want to do
Right.
that. Good call. But, that's, we're in a very hot construction market right now. So I think these prices are very reasonable.
Our neighbor is doing Liquiforce, and they're doing a mile a year. They're paying $300,000. They've already done 30% of their system. Is there something wrong with the system they're using?
I'm not familiar with that Liquiforce. Is that a contractor? Is that a name brand or?
It's a brand. It's a nationwide company based in Canada and the United
It's their
States.
lining.
What is it?
It's just a lining, a plastic
Oh,
one.
okay.
Their lining.
Well, I'd have to investigate it before I come to you. I didn't come prepared to talk, construction stuff.
It lines the existing sewer.
Yeah, I mean, that's the repair method we're talking of. If that is like a I-80 or a Cadillac asphalt type, sewer lining, I think that's a contractor. That's what I thought was a contractor, but
No, it's not
they might have a
contractor.
proprietary,
It's a,
they might have a proprietary name for their material. Any other questions?
So theoretically, you could have some cement that stays because it's okay, some lined with the CIPP, and some that's pipe burst. How are we connecting all of these at the joints where they meet up with the existing cement or any of these other methods?
In the open cut method, when we excavate down to the pipes, we'll remove the damaged pipe, and at the one side there's a bell side, and the other side's a spigot side. They'll put the pipe back on and tighten them together the way they are, and wherever those overlap, they usually saw cut them and put a Fernco strap and Cadillac wrap it, backfill it, heat that, meld it, no
Okay.
problem. As far as the sewer lining in the HDPE, that's gonna go from point A to point B. We usually like to go from manhole to manhole or in as far as they can treat it, because you gotta have a kind of a termination point to push that through, connect to it, and pull it back through under both situations. So, again, look at those videos, because it sounds very complicated. I don't wanna make it sound complicated, but it's very well done on those 2 videos to explain the basic process.
The worst of the worst, the $4.425 million fix,
Mm-hmm.
plus the engineering that goes along with it, we're probably talking about $500,000 in construction costs. Is that a 1-year project, or is that gonna have to be spread out over a longer period of time?
Yeah, I would try to do that in 2 to 3 years. I mean, whenever we do these road projects that we've been doing for quite a long time, we're usually in the $1,700,000, $1,800,000, sometimes as low as $1,200,000, sometimes high as 2 point whatever. So that's a pretty good project. Again, with the lining, that kind of stuff, the more volume, the lower the price is gonna be, but the open cutting, just because these are randomly placed all over, and the actual work that also is included to not only dig the hole, but to build the road back up and put all that back in, requires not only just the sewer pipe work, it requires the pavement work, whether it's asphalt or concrete. So, those, I would say, try to get it in 2 years. 2 years minimum, 3 years is probably a reasonable time frame. But if you guys find funding and it's more than 1 year's worth of work, put it this way.
Mr.
Two's
Mayor.
probably okay.
So at a previous meeting, we authorized, the city to explore with a financial intermediary, sort of the bond issue, and I know that's in our packet. And so basically, if we were to issue these bonds as is being proposed, in the first year, residents would pay, if it's a $200,000 home with a $100,000 taxable value, about $73 a year. If it's a $400,000 home with a roughly $200,000 taxable value, about $150 a year. And then when we get to the year 2046, it's about $167 a year for that $200,000 home and about $300 a year for the $400,000 home, with obvious that there's increases in taxable value, et cetera. These interest rates, despite us being AAA rated, we were projecting a 4% interest rate in 2019, and then I know interest rates are going up, obviously, a 4.25% rate on the 2021 bonds.
Yeah, that's from our financial advisor, our bond advisor gave us those rates.
Okay, so they're comfortable that that's probably where we'd end up? These bonds are issued in a 25-year, two series at 25-year issues. Was there any thought to going to, are we able to go to 30 years for this type of infrastructure to perhaps lower the burden on residents' annual tax rate?
I would have to check with Benzinski, but I don't see a problem with that.
It does lower the millage rate, but it also adds to the cost of the bond.
Sure.
So there's a trade-off.
They'd be paying for longer,
Yes.
but they'd be paying, the burden on them per year would be less.
Yeah, we can have him run the schedule with the 30-year.
I'd just be curious to see how it would,
The millage rates?
what the relief would be to the resident's annual tax bill, and if it's worth the added expense of exploring that.
Can I ask a question? Why aren't we using the state revolving fund at 2.25% for going past 20 years instead of going outside where we're paying twice the interest rate?
State revolving fund is very complicated. There's a cost to actually access that money that would need to be factored into this. And there's no guarantee that 2.25% interest rate will be in effect a year from now or 2 years from now when we need to access the money. So that's why we're comfortable with.
Paying 2% more.
Now, you're assuming that the state revolving fund will still have the 2% interest rate in 2 years. And our bond council is not confident that will remain the same.
County is using the state revolving fund, I think.
Well, if the county used the SAW grant money, they're kind of compelled to use the state revolving fund. You have that benefit of not having to do that simply because you self-funded this situation. And like when we do MDOT jobs, the costs always go up because you have to do the job and then you have to paperwork the job. And those two, in my opinion, having done this for a long time, is totally a crazy waste of money because it hasn't shown, at least to me, that MDOT highways and roads are better built than anything we do here in the city locally. So yes, you can go through there. There's more of an engineering price because we have to now be submitting pay estimates through to the DEQ and doing all of their crazy added state value work in addition. So I'd rather you spend your money on interest and the construction than on us just simply, following their procedure. But again, that is how most people are paying for those, but again, it's a requirement of the SAW grant. And like you said, if you found a deficiency in the 4 or 5 range, you are compelled to fix it within 3 years. And most communities, because they don't have a large pot of money to sit on, are using that source because maybe they're not as highly rated as you guys are, and your interest rates are probably better than some communities that maybe are not in such a good financial condition.
I mean, I'm just curious, would it make sense to put together a schedule on the state revolving fund if we're going to look at the 30-year, just to have something to see that interest rate plus the increased cost, just to know that we don't want to do that option, to compare it on paper?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, and recognizing that the state revolving fund rate now won't be probably, up the interest rate in the bond series issue, so I think it's fair enough to say that the interest rate in the state revolving fund would go up by at least an equivalent amount. So,
All right, you can compare, there are, like I say, there are costs built into it. There's even a cost to apply to the state revolving fund to get money, so there's.
right, yeah, yeah, let's
hidden
factor all that
costs.
in, yeah,
Okay.
and then we can look at the whole picture and see, does that make sense, or 30 years, or 25 years, and go from there.
And we still end up with bond processing fees on a regular basis.
All right, if there's nothing else for Tim, we can move on to the scheduling part of it, that works? Thank you, Tim. What we had proposed is a 5-year program, starting with work this summer 2018, as he had alluded to, $250,000 worth. Asked the voters for a millage November of this year. Assuming that it's passed, we would sell $6.5 million worth of bonds and do work in 2019 and 2020. Sell a second phase of $6.5 million worth of bonds, do the rest of the work in 21, 22. So everything will be completed 5 years from now with work starting now. We are proposing that we do an additional $250,000 worth of work per year in addition to the bond money that is money that's collected on the water bill. The flat rate on the water bill generates about $250,000 a year. That was money that we had used to offset the cost of the cleaning and the televising. We'd like to continue to collect that amount on the water bill, and this way we could start work this year on the sewer repair project. So if this is a timetable that the commission is comfortable with, we could place it on the July agenda, or if there's other options or other scenarios you'd like us to look at.
I would like to see the two estimates. The other thing is by dedicating this entire $250,000 to this project, that means that we will not be able to do anything with the replacement of water meters. That'll be put off for another 4, 5, 6 years, so that residents will not have an option of being alerted, as well as our system, to when there are water usage problems.
We are meeting with the smart water meter company on July 6th, and so at that point, we will have a firmer estimate on what it will cost to switch over. Then we can divide that into costs, and the city commission can decide whether or not they want to use money from fund balance to pay for that, or if they want to tack a second fee on to the water bills to pay for that, or if they want to decrease the amount of money that we proposed for repairs on an annual basis. So that would be a decision that the commission would make once we have numbers, and you could look at what the impact would be on fund balance, the sewer project, or what the additional fee would be to residents, spread over time on water bills. We could present different scenarios and projections once we have a better grasp of the actual number.
Okay, I just don't want to lose one because of the other.
Well, there are also a lot of other issues besides water meters facing the city in the near future. So I would prefer to take a bigger picture on everything that we're looking at, roads and pensions and other infrastructure that needs to be addressed, and I don't want to necessarily tie our hands behind our back for all these other projects because we want to all in on the sewer system, where we might be able to address the worst case here and then start addressing the other issues on a more longer term basis, and address roads and water meters and other issues at the same time. So
the water meters is a little bit more than just exotica. What the water meters allow you to do is, first of all, remotely measure what's going on. The other thing is it allows you to deal with really issues where there are problems in people's homes. The other thing it allows us to do is deal with water loss. Right now we're dealing with sewers, but I'm sure in our whole system we've got that. Tim has some good experience coming from Birmingham where they did that 15, 13 years ago?
They went to smart meters while I was there, so in the last 10 years, but yeah, so you can get alerts where if the usage is out of line, you get an alert on your phone saying,
I think that the sewer repair for our residents is very high on the priority list.
Not objecting at all.
I
All
know,
I'm
but
saying
just
is where the
saying,
month
You
is.
can't compare the issue of water loss and things like that through an old meter to the enormous damage that was done 4 years ago. It's not to say that anything we're talking about here today would prevent it, but we are dealing with a very old system that's desperately in need of repair. I think that our residents understand that. I mean, this is a matter of priority. I mean, you can say, well, my car needs a car wash, or by the way, I have 2 flat tires. You gotta deal with the 2 flat tires first. It's a priority item. So, I'm in favor.
Jules, we have multiple things that we need to deal with.
Hold on, I agree with you, but the topic du jour is sewers. So I'm in favor of moving forward, and I agree with the big picture issue also, but we need to get started.
Yeah, my concern is we have the long-range budget committee, and certainly this is going to be on their radar. But if we're looking at not getting a report from that committee, I mean, they haven't even met yet, until, a year from now, say, I mean, that puts us a year of no improvements and another year of
You have to
a
move,
failed system, so.
because you've got road bonds to pass
Right.
for
The
that.
long-range budget committee, actually, their first meeting is tomorrow. We're asking them to take a look at the budget and only roads. And I'm assuming that the commission wants to start work on sewers ASAP and not wait for a recommendation from the long-range budget committee on that, so.
I'd like to wait, but I don't believe we can. I
Right.
believe we need to.
You don't
Put our
have time in
foot down
the
here.
funding cycle.
And I don't see them coming back any other way and saying, we don't agree, let's not do the sewer repair. I mean, I don't see that happening. So I think if we decide, I mean, look, this should be put on our July meeting for discussion with the 2 additional estimates. I'm in favor of placing it on there for additional discussion. It doesn't mean we necessarily have to move forward at that meeting, but I think we do need to take a look at it, discuss it more, but.
And we'll have some input from that committee by then, at least topical.
What is your deadline for the November,
August
14th.
14th.
14th of August. So we've got, and we can always call a special meeting if it gets up to that date to approve something. And if we do decide to move forward in July, you can update the budget, long-range budget committee that 13 million in bonds are gonna be sold for this, so, that reduces our debt limit and all the other myriad of things that go along with it, and the impact it'll have on our budget.
And impact it'll have on millage rates.
Right. So, I mean, Mr. Mayor, I'd move that we place this item on the July meeting for additional discussion and consideration.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Do we have any public input on what's been discussed this evening?
I have a question. Tim, what can get
Please
done?
come forward to there. Thank you.
Such a-
The meeting's being videotaped.
Hmm?
The meeting's being
I know.
videotaped.
I
Want
know.
to be on TV, Claire?
Yeah, but-
In case somebody, one person's watching, maybe 2.
Hey, I tried to get the city to start lining sewers 25 years ago, so,
Oh, you've told us that before.
yeah. I was just curious, Tim, what can get done for the 250,000? I'm just asking because I'm wondering if that's realistic in terms of what kind of work needs to be done.
Well, we have to look at the critical and the worst. I estimated that there are 50, there's 50, 60, 70 areas of various size pipe that need to be repaired. each one of those is just ballparked at 40 grand right now, simply because that includes various depths of pipe, various sizes of pipe within the road area. So, you know, the work that's done is gonna be 3 or 4 sectional repairs. And if you wanna add a couple of CIPP projects to that, or pipe bursting to that, because the goal would be to see if we can get a contractor that we like. You've got a road contractor that's been in the city for several years through the bid process and extension process, because through our recommendation and your approvals, we felt that they did a good job. So this pilot project's basically to try to get somebody on board that we're comfortable with, you're comfortable with, and then if the bond people allow an extension, then we can go and put a bigger piece in front of them and say, hey, can you do this work next year for the same prices, to try to add value to the city. If that's not the case, and the bond people don't allow that and we have to rebid it, then, you know, we put big packages out there. But we're gonna try to get 3 or 4 repairs done for that price. I'd like to fix the ones that are maybe not under a road if they're in the green belt, but where we have major separation, collapse, the pipe that we can't get a camera through, you know, those kind of things. And I'm sure there's probably 20 of them, so we can pick 3 or 4 or 5 very easily. It's just, we want to make sure that what we are fixing is going to make immediate change for the community and avoid any potential hazard or damage, you know, to residents on those streets, so.
Mr.
I have a question. Is the same contractor gonna do the work regardless of the type of repair it is?
Well, no, generally there are some specialty contractors that will do the slip line and the pipe bursting. But like a underground contractor could fix the pipe, and then they would hire a subcontractor to do the road. You know, like a Deponio could technically do this kind of stuff. It just depends on the size and scope of the project. That's why it's gotta be kind of big enough that we're not just getting somebody that's got a dump truck and wants to come in here and try it, you know, because they've never done it before. We wanna get a good contractor, and that's why a $250,000 project should be meaty enough to get a good contractor that does this every day. Realizing that towards the end of summer and fall is when their work is gonna start winding down, and then this would be an opening for them in their schedules. But again, this work could be done in the wintertime. It doesn't have to be done in the summertime. Open cutting, as long as we get through the frozen ground, could be done in the wintertime. You know, there's less flows going, people have, you know, they're not watering the lawn, or other rain events are coming in there, so. To answer your question, I think we can try to get 3 or 4 sectional repairs done for that immediately, and get a good read of what's down there and what the repair costs are gonna be based on that bid.
Yeah, that's a good point. Or if we decided to do the slip lining, it looks like we could do about almost 5,000 linear feet of
Right.
slip lining for about 250,000.
Yeah, that's what I said, but again, that's more on the pipes that aren't major problems, so I try to hit the sectional stuff first, simply because those pipes, if they haven't collapsed or are gonna be close to collapsing, and, you know, you don't wanna take something that you could have fixed for 50 grand and have to do a $4 million fix because you lost the whole road and, you know, flooded out like over in Fraser, so, you know.
Are there any studies out there, engineering studies that compare the bang for the buck from one type of repair, like we're talking about the pipe bursting with what Commissioner Jenks was asking about the lining? Is there some sort of empirical study that says this holds up better or that holds up? Is there anything out there in terms of scientific literature that can help people trying to decide where, you know, bottom line is what's the best bang for the buck?
Well, basically on the pipe bursting, you're getting a brand new pipe. You're replacing the old one with a brand new one, so just by sheer common sense, that would be better than just simply relining a existing pipe, because you still have the issues with that pipe, whatever they are. You're just simply improving the flow characteristics in there. Now, that pipe bursting is gonna be a little bit more expensive. So again,
But that's anecdotal.
Yeah.
I'm just asking
I'm not
for
aware of any.
something more, you know, as the old Wendy's commercial, used to say, where's the beef?
There's the beef, yeah, I remember that. I think it's just what the city is comfortable with and what we would recommend, because you're gonna have all three of those repairs in the city somewhere. Anything like I said, the clay stuff,
Who else besides Pontiac in this area has done this pipe bursting? Do you know?
most of them is a slip lining that's been done, but, you know, on the east side, I've
How
seen a
about
lot of bids.
outside of Michigan?
It is being done in a lot of southern states. I mean, if you look at those YouTube videos and things, a lot of those are coming from southern areas where, you know, they don't have the frost issues and they have smaller pipes, little smaller communities. So, you know, it was a rural area before, and now we got increased pipe capacity, so it's easier to take the 8-inch pipe that was there and break it and put a 12 or 15 in there, and because your population is increased and growing on there. So, I mean, the data, we just have to mine the data on the internet. But I mean, we go locally, we call contractors that have been doing this. There's a lot in this area. Ann Arbor, I know, did some slip lining because our private sector work. We've done some relining on stuff in Ann Arbor.
Our neighbor did.
I'm sorry?
Our neighbor's done 30% of their pipes already.
Who was that, Oak Park
Was-
or
Berkeley,
Berkeley?
with
Okay.
HRC. Now, but your last experience was 2005?
Our companies, but
Okay,
I don't think anything's changed since 2005.
Okay.
In the
all right.
practical method of it, the procedure is still the same, and but yeah, we did 40 miles in Pontiac.
Okay, and what
15 by
about the slip?
We've only done that on private sector work.
Okay,
I mean, we represent Birmingham, Madison Heights, Huntington Woods, we work in Royal
but
Oak.
have you done it in any of those communities?
They're not at that point yet.
Okay,
You've got one of the older communities, I mean, like the Oak Parks and Royal Oaks, I mean, they've not undertaken that at this stage, but I believe everybody who submitted for a SAW grant, and there was a waiting list of 4 years, and, you know, hundreds of communities statewide are gonna be doing this.
I got mine next door.
And so your firm has direct experience overseeing this type of activity based on Pontiac. I mean, are there engineering firms that specialize in this type of thing, or are you comfortable with this underground engineering as well?
Yeah, we've been building your roads with associated sewer work since 1995. I mean, I've designed that stuff for 15 years. I've supervised it for another 10. My engineer, Brad, is the guy in there. There's really no need for you guys to look elsewhere. We can handle this. It's not a difficult thing. And anyone who's doing this stuff now has simply got about a year head start on everybody else who's going through the process. You
And
know,
we're-
it's a new thing.
And we're not asking to have the whole system built from scratch. We're essentially just making marginal repairs throughout the system.
Most of them is remediation
Right.
and repair. You know, like I said, the
They're not
open cutting
Right,
is minor.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
You bet.
Any other